So good morning. Now we are going to begin with the very first chapter of class 8 science, microorganisms and viruses. Right. If we are going to talk about this chapter, microorganisms and viruses, you must first know what microorganism is, what a microorganism is, right? So in this chapter we are going to be introduced with microorganisms, what are its various types, how these microorganisms are useful to us or how they harm us, and many more things step by step. So let's start this chapter with the very first question that arises in our mind, that what are microorganisms? What are these beings? What is this term known as microorganism? So as you can see, I've written that microorganism, this microorganism basically formed of two terms or two words, micros and bios. Micros means small and bios means life. So from this we can get an idea that basically small life forms or small organisms are known as microorganisms. So that means I can write it like this: living organisms too small to be seen by naked eye. So that means that whatever any organism, any kind of organism which is not visible to my eye, which I cannot see through my eye, is a microorganisms. But let's say that I want to see a microorganisms. I really want to know what a microorganism looks like. Is there any possible way through which I can see that microorganism? Yes, there is a way. You can use any optical instrument like microscope or magnifying glass through which you can see through which we can see a microorganisms. So that means you finally get an idea, right, that whenever we hear a term like you've got a bacteria infection, or you've got a bacterial infection, or you've got a fungal infection, that this bacteria and this fungal or this fungi, which we do not know how looks like, is basically a microorganism. So living organisms too small to be seen by naked eye are microorganisms, and if we want to see them, yes, we can see them, and we can see them through a microscope or magnifying glass. Now if these are some organisms, they must possess some characteristics or property as well. They must have something that differentiate them from other organisms, right? So now we are going to study about the different characteristics exhibited by microorganisms. First of all, that we need to understand is that a microorganism, you can either call a single cell or a collection of cell. Both of them can be called as a microorganism. So we can say that a microorganism may occur as a single cell or collection of cells, right? If we have a single cell like this, we can say that this is a microorganism. But if we have collection of cells, even then we can say that this is a microorganisms. Now what is cell? Cell is basically the basic building block of an organism. I will try to discuss this term cell in the later lecture when we try to classify these microorganisms. Let's now just focus on the characteristics. So I can basically in one term, in one line, if you want to know what cell is, so we can say that a cell is the basic building block of a living organism. It is that block through the repetition of which you will get a complete whole organism. Now let's talk about the second characteristics that is shown by these microorganisms. These are very small in size. They are so small, we have already concluded in the definition that they are very small, so small that we cannot see them. So these microorganisms, anything that you want to call at as a microorganism, should be very small in size, that you cannot view them through your eyes, okay, or with your eyes. So these are very small in size, and this is basically the reason why they are termed as microorganism, because micro basically means small, so small organisms. So now the third property is that they can be found everywhere. This is one of the phenomenal quality or the characteristics of a microorganism, that they can be found everywhere. Everywhere means anywhere, everywhere, that is in air, water, inside earth's crust, and many such situations, or in places where normal person cannot exist or survive. And if you are interested in knowing how they survive, they they simply survive by forming a hard outer covering. Like if this is my microorganisms, how will this microorganism exist? How will be they be able to found everywhere? That is, they basically form a hard outer covering on their bodies. This is basically this property, that is the microorganism is found everywhere, is related to our next property. In the next property we say that In the next property, we say that microorganisms survive in extreme temperature conditions. See, a normal person will not be able to cope up if the weather is too hot or if the weather is too cold. If it is too cold, then also we will be uncomfortable. If the temperature is too hot, even then we will be uncomfortable. So a normal person or a normal human being cannot survive in extreme temperature conditions. However, here our microorganism can basically survive in extreme temperature conditions, in extreme cold and extreme even in extreme warm in extreme hot weather, it can basically survive. So how, that is why I said that the property that they can be found anywhere is related to our next this property. So let's talk about how they can be found everywhere or how they can survive in extreme conditions. They simply survive in extreme condition by forming a hard outer covering. If this is your microorganism, this microorganism will basically do what? It will surround itself by a hard outer covering, which is known as crust. This crust is then going to help it in surviving. And whenever this microorganism finds that now the situation is comfortable, now my condition, my surrounding or my environment is suitable, it will come out of its shell on its own. So basically, if anybody asks you what a crust is that hard outer covering of a microorganism, or a hard outer covering shell of a microorganism through which it survives in extreme temperature conditions. So let's talk about the last property, right? So in last property I've written, then this property states through this property we come to find, or through this characteristic we come to the conclusion that some of the microorganisms are helpful to us while some just aren't. That means that some microorganisms will help you in various things, like in the like yeast is going to help you in baking industries, and while some other are going to help you in vaccines and many other things, while some will cause you diseases. Some microorganisms are going to be useful to you while some will not be, and this property will be discussed in the later videos, in which we will discuss about the topic friendly and harmful microorganisms. So let's conclude that now we have studied what microorganisms are, and we have also come to know what these characteristics are. So we have basically studied about the 5 common characteristics exhibited by microorganisms. This concludes our topic.